Are you looking for a tool use system that will support the play-based ethos of Forest School? If so, you need what I call the 5 T's of child-led tool use.
Well, hi, I'm Lou, and welcome to your woods.
Hi, I'm Lou, and thanks for tuning in. So, as we know, Forest School is play-based. So we follow the interests of the learners, and that means that it's likely that we'll have lots of different things all happening at the same time. So how does that fit in with using tools? Because at Forest School, play-based, learner-centred, we don't want a conveyor belt of everybody doing the same craft, because that isn't learner-led. So how do we make tool use play-based and learner-led? And that's what I thought I would share with you, because actually using tools can really extend children's play. It can increase their skills, increase creativity, mastery, risk awareness. There's all these benefits of using tools. And I just want to share with you what I call my 5 T's to child-led tool use. So let's get into it. So T1 is task. What are we making with the tools? What's the project? So imagine you're at Forest School, all the kids are playing, and then a kid runs up to you and says,
I want to build a fairy house.
I want to make a fairy house. That's great motivation. That's a great place to start. Let's make a fairy house, or a car, or a snake, or whatever it is that's come out of their play. So we want to match the task to the learner, as in something that they're going to be interested in. Of course, if you're still early days in a Forest School process, your kids might not yet be at the point of initiating the ideas. So in which case, maybe you've noticed them playing, doing something. Say they've been using tapping sticks to make noises on the forest floor. Maybe you kind of suggest that they make xylophones or musical instruments of some sort, and you could just experiment with that and see how offering that choice might motivate them or not. The other thing about task is that you have to match it to where you think their ability level is at. So take the example of a xylophone. At its most basic, a xylophone could be some sawed pieces of wood, but at the other end, it could be an extremely kind of crafted, proper xylophone. So the task itself, you can kind of adapt. There's more than one way of making a certain item. So you think about what version of that item to make that best fits the learner's needs. T2 is time. So following on from what we were just saying with task, we want to think, how complicated is that project going to be? How many different tools are going to be used? How long is it going to take? How many different steps and different processes is part of that? And again, you want to adapt that to meet the needs of the learner. So say if I'm working with a 3-year-old, I'm going to want something that's going to take a shorter amount of time than say with a 15-year-old that perhaps has got more patience to go through more complicated processes. And also, just a little tip, that's not to say that little early years children can't do projects that are more elaborate. It's just that you might need to break them down into smaller chunks of time. So maybe they just saw one piece this session, and then they come back to it next time. Or maybe it's a group project where each child drills one hole and you make a giant xylophone, for example, or whatever it is that the project is. T3 is tool. So you want to think about what tool or tools that particular child are capable of using based on what you know about their kind of strength, their dexterity, their stamina. So different tools obviously require different levels of coordination and different levels of accuracy and skill. So as a little tip, the younger the children, with the ones with less strength perhaps in their hands and wrists, if you use tools that use bigger muscles, so using, like, for example, bow saws 2-person, so that they're building up from their upper arms and shoulders kind of muscles, or using eyed augers rather than smaller drills, because then that's using again the larger muscle groups. So thinking about what tool meets the needs of the learner, and of course also making sure that tools are size appropriate for learners, and you might need to be working in pairs, for example, for some of the tool work as well. T4 is tree. So that's about what species of wood you choose for your task, because you can make things easier or more difficult depending on the properties of the woods that you're using. So for example, softer woods are going to be easier to carve and to use tools on rather than hardwoods. Some woods split more easily if the task requires splitting the woods, as opposed to more knotty species. There's also maybe practicalities based on the nature of the task as well. So for example, say you're making a spatula or a butter knife or some sort of utensil, you also need to make sure that the tree species you're using isn't toxic and is food safe, so that you can actually use the item afterwards. So tree, yeah, thinking about the species. So finally, T5 is techniques. So this is about the actual techniques that you are using in the craft that you're making and matching those to meet the needs of the learners. So for example, if you're using knives, there are many different techniques and different ways of cutting with a knife. So taking a small diameter piece of wood and splitting it using a knife and a mallet, or battening, is a very easy sort of technique compared to more kind of carving techniques using like the pivot cut and things like that, where you need a bit more coordination. So again, if you've got younger learners or those with less dexterity, doing some battening, 2-person battening, one person's got the mallet, one person's holding the knife still, you can very quickly achieve something using that knife in a very simple technique. So of course, there are lots of other kind of carpentry techniques as well that you might use in woodworking as well, half lap joints and all sorts of different things, understanding the properties of wood, so putting like pegs and things in holes so that the wood shrinks around the thing. There's all sorts of great things that can extend people's understandings and skills, but you want to introduce those at the right pace, in the right moment. If you go too complex and it becomes unachievable for learners, then they'll probably lose motivation, or they might, think that woodcraft and tool use isn't for them, and we want to set learners up to achieve at Forest School. So there we go, 5 T's of child-led tool use for Forest School. Do you have any tips for using tools through play? Do let me know in the comment section below. If you've enjoyed this video, do give us a thumbs up and consider subscribing to our channel so that you can join us again in the woods next time. And thanks for watching. Safe tool use can be part of play. Use the 5 T's to help learners do it their way. Adapt the process to meet their needs, so you can create and make when you head to the trees.
Shaking.
To the trees. To the trees?